Growth is expected to slow to 0.9% this year as the country battled infrastructure constraints and poor domestic and global environment. Government acknowledges this level of growth is below the pace required to generate significant employment growth and support national development. The slow implementation of structural reforms could lower business confidence and deter new investments. Government spending exceeds revenue. Public debt remains high. Debt servicing costs continue to rise. Government says risks to the fiscal outlook include the low growth leading to lower tax revenue, rising borrowing costs, and unaffordable public service wage bill settlements. But it says it remains committed to stabilizing public debt and ensuring sustainable public finances.
Government must maintain a prudent fiscal stance. The fiscal consolidation strategy we adopted several years ago has, one, restrained growth mainly in consumption expenditure, and two, allowed us to use part of higher than expected revenues to reduce the deficit. As a result, we're bringing the fiscal deficit down without resorting to tax increases or further cuts in social wage and infrastructure.
Learning and culture, comprised of education and associated sectors, received the biggest slice of government spending, followed by social development, which covers different social grants. Debt servicing costs crowd spending with an allocation of 340 billion rand, which translates to 8 cents of every 1 rand of revenue collected going towards servicing debt. Community development, covering human settlements and public transport, gets 260 billion rand, while health gets 259 billion rand and peace and security 227 billion rand. In its attempt to solve Eskom's debt and electricity supply crisis, the troubled power utility will get relief amounting to 254 billion rand over the next 3 years. Eskom's debt currently stands at 423 billion rand. Government guarantees 350 billion rand of this debt. This implies an increase in government debt. Economists say the goal of fiscal consolidation is still within reach.
It is achievable, and fortunately the Treasury budgeted for that to continue. Lower deficits over time, primary surplus. In other words, we no longer need to borrow to pay interest on our debt. That's a huge plus. And even with Eskom's addition of debt, the debt profile still stabilizes and still comes off in future years.
El says rating agencies will likely welcome the budget and will wait until later in the year to review the country's ratings. The finance minister says South Africans should be prepared for the possibility of the country being grey-listed by the Financial Action Task Force. South Africa was found lacking in terms of anti-money laundering and terrorism financing controls. The finance minister says while 2 laws have been enacted to address the deficiencies in the legislative framework, there are remaining deficiencies that do not require legislation. FATF is expected to make its decision on South Africa later this week. Gloria Safako, SABC News, Parliament.